In this podcast episode, Ben Shapiro thoroughly examines the recent turmoil in Minneapolis, sparked by the shooting of Alex Prey by Border Patrol agents. He delves into the political motivations behind the unrest, scrutinizes the responses from both Democrats and Republicans, analyzes the role of federal law enforcement, and explores the broader consequences of sanctuary city policies and local political stances on immigration enforcement. Ben Shapiro recounts the sequence of events surrounding the shooting of Alex Prey, a 37-year-old intensive care nurse shot by federal agents during an immigration enforcement operation. Multiple video angles show a chaotic scene where Prey appeared to be assisting a woman who was pushed to the ground by immigration agents while filming the incident. After resisting arrest and being wrestled to the ground by several agents, an officer reportedly disarmed Prey by removing a gun from his waistband. Following that, shots were fired, resulting in Prey's death. While the videos raise questions, Shapiro emphasizes the complexity and caution needed in interpreting these events, noting that officers must make split-second decisions based on perceived threats. He underscores the legal standard that officers may use deadly force if they reasonably believe there is an imminent threat of serious bodily harm. Shapiro argues that the chaos engulfing Minneapolis is not accidental, but deliberately driven by Democratic politicians and legacy media to undermine federal law enforcement's immigration operations. He points out that red states, despite handling higher numbers of deportations, do not experience similar unrest due to their cooperation with federal authorities, contrasting that with sanctuary cities like Minneapolis, where local officials obstruct ICE efforts. The Minneapolis Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey are cited as key figures who have inflamed tensions by publicly denouncing ICE, referring to their presence as a Gestapo-like occupation, and implicitly encouraging protests that cross into obstruction and federal crimes. This has led to increased confrontations, violence, and tragic outcomes, including the deaths of Americans like Prey and Renee Good. The episode highlights how local resistance to federal immigration enforcement has escalated into organized obstruction. Protesters in Minneapolis have used encrypted apps like Signal to coordinate patrols and alerts designed to interfere with ICE arrests. Shapiro exposes the involvement of figures such as Minnesota State Representative Alex Falconer, who actively supports these networks. This defiance often results in violent encounters. Notably, DHS reported an officer losing a fingertip, allegedly due to protesters biting. Furthermore, crowds violently attacked a hotel where federal officers stayed, escalating fears and tensions in the city. Shapiro argues that valorizing such obstruction only perpetuates the cycle of violence and chaos. Shapiro stresses the importance of facts and thorough investigations, criticizing both local officials and federal figures who prematurely label these incidents as murders or politically motivated attacks without appropriately awaiting investigation results. He criticizes Minnesota's governor and mayor for stoking inflammatory rhetoric while disregarding objective legal standards and video evidence. He also scrutinizes parts of the federal government, including DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, for making exaggerated claims that label Prey as a domestic terrorist bent on killing law enforcement, which the videos do not corroborate. This mischaracterization undermines trust in law enforcement and in the government's ability to transparently address the situation. Border Patrol and ICE agents are shown defending their actions as responses to threats posed by those resisting arrest and carrying firearms. Shapiro points out that the presence of Border Patrol agents in Minneapolis, usually ICE's jurisdiction, signals increased federal involvement due to local obstruction. Statements from Border Patrol leadership reaffirm that agents felt threatened by an armed individual resisting disarmament, which legally justifies use of deadly force under those circumstances. However, Shapiro insists that law enforcement must maintain credibility by delivering transparent, measured explanations and avoiding inflammatory rhetoric that escalates public tensions. High-profile Democrats, including Governor Walz, Minneapolis Mayor Frey, and Senator Amy Klobuchar, have voiced strong opposition to the federal immigration operations, with some equating ICE to secret police or Nazi-like forces. Walz explicitly called for ICE withdrawal and framed protest as a patriotic duty, which Shapiro condemns as enabling lawlessness. Conversely, Republicans urge a tougher stance, with some advocating for either stronger federal enforcement or even temporarily pulling ICE out of Minneapolis to avoid further casualties. Shapiro encourages a diplomatic approach where the Trump administration negotiates with local officials to condition federal cooperation on greater local support and communication, emphasizing that law enforcement must continue to operate without obstruction. The tensions in Minneapolis reveal a dangerous precedent. If federal law enforcement can be nullified locally through political opposition and public protests, it threatens the rule of law and national unity. Shapiro warns that such local resistance breeds chaos that endangers both officers and civilians and erodes the authority of federal statutes. The episode also examines how Democratic narratives frame the situation as oppressive, often conflating legal enforcement with cruelty or oppression, complicating efforts to address immigration issues pragmatically. Interwoven throughout the podcast are sponsorship messages promoting Daily Wire Plus membership, a cinematic series titled Rise of the Merlin, and Matt Walsh's Real History series. Additional advertisements highlight Pure Talk wireless services for veterans and Shopify as an e-commerce platform enabling entrepreneurship. These sponsorships underline the show's broader conservative media ecosystem and engagement strategy while serving as transitions between topic segments. President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance emphasize that the unrest and violence in Minneapolis are orchestrated by far-left activists in concert with local officials obstructing immigration enforcement. Trump points to the presence of loaded weapons and failures of local police to protect federal agents as root causes of escalating violence. He signals plans to send trusted operatives like Tom Homan to Minnesota to manage the situation more effectively. Shapiro endorses this approach, noting the administration must balance firm enforcement with pragmatic dialogue to avoid further disorder while asserting the primacy of federal law. Throughout the discussion, Shapiro calls for comprehensive, impartial investigations into the shootings and confrontations. He emphasizes that conclusions should be based on all available evidence, including video footage, testimonies, and forensic analysis, without premature political judgments. Maintaining law enforcement credibility and public trust hinges on transparent procedures that ensure accountability while recognizing the complex, high-stakes nature of these encounters. Finally, Shapiro underscores how sanctuary city policies and local refusal to cooperate with ICE fundamentally exacerbate these problems. In red states, higher deportation rates correlate with cooperation between state, local, and federal authorities, resulting in fewer violent confrontations. Minneapolis's resistance amplifies federal involvement and heightens tensions. Shapiro challenges local officials to propose viable law enforcement solutions short of nullification and insists that federal law enforcement will persist in its duties despite local opposition, warning that failure to do so threatens the fabric of American governance.